Your phone camera is watching you, and almost no one is disabling the one setting that actually matters. There's a green dot on your screen right now, and you have trained yourself to ignore it. That single point of light is the only warning your phone gives you before something on the other side of that lens sees what you see. Most people glance past it 100 times a day without a second thought. But somewhere, right now, on a device just like yours, that dot is lit, and the person holding the phone has no idea their camera just switched on. Read that again. Not hacked in some cinematic hoodie in a basement way, not broken into by a criminal mastermind, turned on quietly, legally, by an app they installed themselves for a permission they clicked allow on without reading months or years ago, and forgot about completely. This is not a story about paranoia. This is a story about a setting sitting inside your phone right now that most manufacturers do not want to make obvious, that most apps are counting on you never finding, and that almost nobody checks until something has already gone wrong. What you're about to learn is not theoretical. It is happening at scale in 2026 to ordinary people, and the mechanisms behind it are more layered, more legal, and more disturbing than most tech articles are willing to say out loud. Let's start with what your phone actually shows you when your camera activates, because this is where the first illusion breaks. On Android 12 and every version since, an icon appears in the status bar the instant an app touches your camera or microphone, and tapping it reveals exactly which app is responsible. On iPhone, the indicator is a small colored dot at the top of the screen, and diving into settings and privacy shows a running log of who has been listening or watching. Sounds reassuring, doesn't it? Here's where it gets worse. Researchers who studied thousands of real surveillance apps found that some of them are specifically engineered to suppress or hide that exact indicator, meaning the safety signal you've been trained to trust can be the first thing an attacker disables. Think about what that means. The reassurance built into your operating system, the one thing you were told to watch for, can be quietly switched off by the same software using your lens. You're not being paranoid by doubting the dot. You're being realistic. Now, let's talk about how these tools actually get onto a phone, because the popular image of a lone hacker breaking through firewalls from across the world is, for the vast majority of cases, simply wrong, according to detailed forensic breakdowns of how modern spyware operates. The overwhelming majority of these infections begin with physical access. Someone picks up an unlocked phone for 2 or 3 minutes, taps install, grants a handful of permissions that look harmless in the moment, and hides the icon. That's it. That is the entire attack. No genius required, no dark web tools, just proximity, opportunity, and a phone that wasn't locked down. And this is where everything changes, because it means the threat model most people imagine, a distant stranger targeting them at random, is almost never the real one. The real one is far closer. It's someone who already has your passcode or knows it or watches you type it. It's someone who has held your phone before for what felt like an innocent reason. But physical access is only the beginning of the story, and this is the part almost nobody talks about. On iPhones, where installing hidden apps the traditional way is deliberately difficult, the real vulnerability isn't the hardware at all. It's the cloud account attached to it. If someone obtains your Apple ID credentials and manages to get past two-factor authentication, they don't need to touch your phone ever again. They can log in from anywhere on Earth and pull your synced photos, your messages, your location history through Find My, all without installing a single piece of software on the device in your pocket. Let that sink in. The most protected phone operating system in the world can still be turned into a surveillance tool, not through a technical exploit, but through a stolen password and a moment of carelessness with a verification code. This is not a flaw in the phone. This is a flaw in how humans manage trust. On Android, the landscape is even wider, because the platform allows installation from outside official app stores, and that flexibility, built for freedom and customization, has become fertile ground for a specific and disturbing category of software known as stalkerware. This is not a fringe threat confined to obscure corners of the internet. In one of the most detailed public investigations into this ecosystem, researchers documented a functioning surveillance app that has been continuously available on Google's own official app store since October of 2023, marketed under the guise of a lock screen protector, quietly requesting the single most dangerous permission that exists on Android, the accessibility service. Once granted, that permission lets the app read everything on the screen, simulate taps and gestures, and take silent screenshots, all while presenting the user with a convincing fake shutdown screen. The phone appears to power off. The screen goes dark, but underneath, the camera, the microphone, and the GPS remain fully active, wide awake, and reporting everything back to a dashboard someone else is watching. This is not chaos. This is a deliberately engineered illusion of safety, sold through the exact platform millions of people trust the most. Here's where the story escalates from personal violation into something with real legal teeth. because researchers have flagged this specific case repeatedly since as early as 2018, when academic teams from major universities formally identified the app as intimate partner surveillance software and reported it directly to the platform hosting it. And yet, according to the most recent tracking of the case, the app remained live, generating revenue through the platform's own advertising network years after being flagged. What most people are not seeing is that the barrier to removing dangerous surveillance software from the App Store or Google Play isn't always technical capability. Sometimes it's institutional will. Meanwhile, enforcement agencies have occasionally moved against individual developers. One stalkerware founder recently pleaded guilty in a case that legal analysts are calling a signal that prosecutions are finally beginning to catch up with the industry. But for every company that faces consequences, informed researchers warn that countless similar apps remain fully operational, fully monetized, and fully invisible to the people whose cameras they control. And this is where the story stops being about individual bad actors entirely, because there's a second, much larger layer to this, one operating in full daylight, backed by legal frameworks, rather than hidden behind fake shutdown screens. According to recent congressional testimony, senior federal law enforcement officials have confirmed, on the record, that government agencies are purchasing Americans' location histories and behavioral data directly from commercial data brokers, not through a warrant, not through a subpoena served on a tech company under judicial oversight, through a purchase, the same way any company buys marketing data, because information bought from a broker does not carry the same constitutional protections as information collected directly by the government. Think about what that means for a moment. Your movements, tracked by the apps on your phone that requested location access for reasons that seemed reasonable at the time, can end up for sale, repackaged, and purchased by the very institutions that would otherwise need a judge's signature to access the same information directly. The scope of what's being harvested extends well beyond location pins on a map. Reporting from early 2026 describes a national policy push, encouraging wider deployment of AI systems across federal data infrastructure, alongside documented cases of major social media and technology companies providing identifying user information, names, emails, phone numbers, account activity, in response to a wave of government subpoenas. This is the real story most people are not seeing, because it doesn't look like the movie version of surveillance. There's no black van outside your house. There's a dashboard, a data pipeline, and a legal gray zone wide enough to drive an entire industry through. And this is where it gets worse again, because the same reporting describes dating and social apps openly building AI systems designed to scan entire camera rolls. Not just the photos you choose to share, but everything stored on your device, all under terms of service, most users accept in seconds without reading a single line. Now pull back and look at the full architecture of what has been built here, because no single piece of this looks alarming in isolation, and that is precisely the design. A permission request here, a terms of service update there, a data broker relationship buried in a privacy policy addendum. Each individual link in the chain is defensible, even legal, but stack them together and you get something that functions, in practice, like a surveillance network with no single point of accountability. The app developer says they only collect what's necessary. The data broker says they only aggregate what's already public or voluntarily shared. The government says it's simply purchasing commercially available information like any other buyer. And at the center of that triangle sits your camera, your microphone, and your location. Moving between hands you never agreed to hand them to. So what actually protects you inside this landscape? Not fear, not disconnecting entirely from modern life. Precision. According to current security guidance for 2026, the single most important adjustment most people are not making is restricting microphone and precise location access to only while using the app, rather than always. Because there's no legitimate reason a flashlight app or a casual mobile game needs round-the-clock access to what you're saying or exactly where you're standing. On both Android and iOS, permission settings now let you audit every single app with camera access in one place, and both platforms have introduced automatic permission resets for apps you haven't opened in months, quietly cutting off access you probably forgot you ever granted. This sounds like a small technical detail. It is not. It is the difference between an app having a narrow situational window into your device and having an open, permanent one. But here's where it gets worse before it gets better, because auditing permissions only catches what the operating system is willing to show you, and sophisticated surveillance tools are specifically built to survive exactly that kind of check. This is why security researchers consistently recommend a second layer, checking for device administrator privileges on Android, because stalkerware frequently requests this elevated status specifically to resist being uninstalled and to survive a standard app removal attempt. It's why they recommend checking whether install from unknown sources has been quietly enabled without your knowledge, since that single toggle is the doorway through which most non-official surveillance software enters a device in the first place. And it's why, on iPhone, security guidance now points people toward checking installed configuration profiles and the list of devices signed into their Apple ID, because on Apple's ecosystem, the account is frequently a bigger liability than the hardware itself. There's also the matter of physical hardening, the oldest and still one of the most effective defenses available, because no software vulnerability can defeat a camera lens that is physically covered. Security researchers continue to recommend a simple sliding cover or even a basic sticker over the front-facing lens for anyone genuinely concerned about covert activation, precisely because it sidesteps the entire digital cat-and-mouse game. If the lens is physically blocked, it does not matter whether the indicator light has been suppressed, whether the accessibility service has been silently granted, or whether some AI system somewhere has been trained to scan a camera roll. A blocked lens sees nothing, reports nothing, and betrays nothing, regardless of how sophisticated the software behind it becomes. Still, hardware fixes only address the camera itself, and the deeper pattern running through everything we've covered points to something larger than any single setting or toggle. The people building these systems, whether they're stalkerware developers hiding behind lock screen utility branding, data brokers repackaging location trails for resale, or federal agencies buying access rather than compelling it, are all exploiting the same underlying weakness: the enormous gap between what a permission technically allows and what a user actually understood they were agreeing to. Nobody installs a flashlight app believing they've handed over precise GPS tracking rights. Nobody sets up a new phone believing their Apple ID password alone could someday become the single point of failure for their entire private life. The system does not need to break the law to violate your privacy. It only needs you to keep clicking allow. This is precisely why awareness has become the actual front line, more than any single app or antivirus scan. Consumer security tools, however well designed, consistently miss custom or recently updated surveillance software, according to current forensic guidance from digital investigators who specialize in exactly this field. That means the manual audit, the 15 minutes spent actually opening your settings and looking at what has access to your camera, your microphone, and your location, remains more reliable than almost any app you could install to do it for you. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. That 15-minute audit is something the vast majority of smartphone owners have never once performed. Not when they bought the device, not when they updated the operating system, and not now, months or years into ownership, with dozens of apps quietly accumulating permissions in the background the entire time. So where does this actually leave you standing here with a device in your pocket that has more surveillance potential built into it than most professional spy equipment did 20 years ago? It leaves you with a choice that is smaller and more immediate than it might feel. Open your settings. Look at every single app with camera and microphone access. Ask, honestly, whether each one actually needs it, or whether it was simply granted once in a rushed moment and never questioned again. Switch location permissions from always to only while using the app wherever that option exists. Check for unfamiliar device administrator apps. Consider, seriously, a physical cover for your front camera if any part of this story left you uneasy. None of these steps require technical expertise. All of them require only the willingness to actually look. But the uncomfortable truth beneath everything we've walked through tonight is that individual vigilance, however necessary, is treating a symptom of something much larger. The architecture connecting app permissions, data brokers, and government purchasing power was not built by accident, and it is not slowing down. If anything, every indicator from 2026 points toward acceleration, toward more AI systems scanning more personal data, toward more institutions discovering that buying access is easier than earning it. The green dot on your screen was designed to be the last line of defense, a simple visual promise that you would always know when you were being watched. And we've just spent the last several minutes proving that even that promise can be quietly switched off by the very systems it was meant to expose. So the question isn't really whether your phone camera can be turned against you. We've already established that it can, that it has been, and that the tools to do it are sitting on official app stores right now, generating revenue, waiting. The real question is how much longer the gap between what people believe their privacy settings protect and what those settings actually protect is allowed to widen before something forces a reckoning. Will it take a landmark court case? Will it take a breach large enough that no one can look away? Or will it simply keep expanding quietly, one overlooked permission at a time, until the version of privacy we remember having no longer exists in any meaningful form? That dot on your screen is still there. The only thing that's changed now is whether you're still willing to look away from it.